Today we're going to talk a little bit about how we can control distance with our wedge shots and the type of equipment that you need to have when you're playing these shots. Very important for scoring purposes that when you get within 100 yards of the green, you get that ball onto the green in a fairly close proximity of the hole so that you can get maybe make yourself a birdie and at very worst make a par. Or if you get yourself in trouble, you get the ball close to the green, you want to be able to get that up and down. So the first thing that we need to address when we talk about those type of shots are the type of equipment that you play. Generally, most players now will play with three types of wedges. This is a 58-degree wedge, which I carry in my bag. We also carry a 52-degree wedge and a pitching wedge. Some players you'll see will carry a pitching wedge, 52, 56, and 60-degree wedge, depending upon whether they have enough room for four wedges or not. And the reason you want to carry different wedges is so that it's a lot easier to control your distance, and so that you can, when you have different yardages going into the greens, you can control those shots and get them as close to the hole as possible without having to try to adjust your swing too much. When we talk about lofts, we also want to take a look at the bounce that's on the club. When we talk about bounce, we talk about the difference between the leading edge of the club and the trailing edge of the club. Bounce is designed so that when the club gets into the soil, it actually hits the soil and then bounces right up out of the ground. Now, if you're playing a golf course that has firm conditions, or a golf course where you have really tight lies, ball sits down close to the fairway, less bounce is going to be better. If you play in a golf course that has soft conditions, more bounce is going to be better. The reason for that is once that club enters into the ground, like so, bounce is going to actually help that club hit, the trailing edge will hit the ground and kick out of the soil. If you have a club that has too much bounce in firm conditions, that club is going to enter the soil, and as soon as it hits the soil, it's going to skip right up, and you're going to hit a lot of thin shots. You're going to blade shots over the green. And conversely, if you're playing in soft conditions with a club that has too little bounce, that club will hit into the ground, and it'll tend to just keep digging down into the ground, make you hit a lot of fat shots and real deep divots. So it's important that you understand two things. First is the type of conditions that you're playing in, and second is the type of swinger or player that you are. There's two types of player. There's what we call a digger driver, someone whose golf club comes down to the ground at a very steep angle, or there's also what we call a sweeper or slider, someone that comes into the ball at a shallow angle of approach, club's moving fairly level to the ground. When you're a digger, bounce is going to be your friend because that club's going to come into the ground at a steep angle. The bounce is going to help hit the soil and come right back out of the ground. It'll eliminate that real fat shot or real deep divot. If you're a slider or sweeper, bounce is not going to be your friend because if you don't hit that ball precisely at the bottom of your arc of your swing, more bounce is going to cause that club to bounce off the ground and into the golf ball, and you'll hit a thin type shot or a low line drive. And if we can get you to take a look right down here at the ground, Frank, we're going to kind of exaggerate this a little bit. This is a fairly firm condition right here, fairly firm ground. If we were to get that club on fairly firm ground with a lot of bounce, that leading edge is going to sit up off the edge of the ground like that. Again, you try to do that with the club, you're going to bounce that club into the ground and hit a low line drop. Okay? If we get ourselves into a situation where we have soft soil and we start to dig down into the ground without any bounce, that club's going to keep digging, and we're going to end up hitting fat shots. So, now that we've addressed the equipment portion, what we need to do is talk about how we're going to control distances of our shot. Now, a 58-degree sand wedge for me with a full swing is going to go about 100 yards. So if I were to just step back here in my normal full swing, hit that shot, it's going to go about 100 yards. Now, my 52-degree wedge is going to go about 115 yards. Okay? So in between 100 and 115 yards, we have a gap, which we need to figure out how we're going to control distance. If I have a 105 or 110 yard shot, it's going to be important that I don't hit it 100 or 115 because I'm going to have a 15, 20 foot putt, or I'd like to have a 5 or 10 foot putt. Same thing when we go less than 100 yards. We get in the 90, 80, 70 yard range, we're going to need to figure out how we can control that distance more accurately so that we get ourselves in a position where we can have a short birdie putt. So, first thing we'll talk about is how to control the distance. Again, we talked about a full swing being 80 yards, a full swing being 100 yards. In order for us to hit a 90-yard shot, we're going to use a three-quarter swing. So instead of that full swing, full distance backswing up to here, what we're going to do is shorten our swing to about three-quarters. Take the club back to about three-quarter swing, and then go ahead and swing and accelerate through to a full finish. So instead of the full swing, we're going to go three-quarters, and then finish about three-quarters. Back and through about the same length is going to give us the decreased amount of distances. We want to step it down to 80 yards. we'll go to a half swing. Take the club back to where the left arm is just short of parallel from the ground. Get through about the same distance. Again, we're going to drop down 10 yards. For 70 yards, we'll go with about a 1/4 swing. Take the club back so the hands are just about waist high. Turn through and finish. The important part about all these short shots is, even though your backswing is getting shorter, you want to make sure that you continue that follow through so that you get your weight shifted on your left side and turn through. Otherwise, we're going to get into bouncing the club into the ball, hitting behind the ball, and we're going to hit it from about 10-15 feet. We want to make sure that we continue all our weight through onto the left side, and that way when we finish in a balanced position, the club will still be accelerating through the ball, and we'll get that nice clean crisp contact that we're after. It's very important that you get that solid contact, because in order to control the distance on the shots, you need to get the ball in the center of the club face. If we get that ball off center, for every half inch we get it off center, you're going to lose 7% distance and the carry of your shot. For every inch we get off center, it's going to be about 14%. So we need to make sure we get that ball right in the center of the club face. We're hitting a 100-yard shot. When you get that ball a half inch off center on the club face, that means you're going to lose about 7 yards off your shot. Well, 7 yards turns a 2 or 3 foot putt into about a 20-foot putt. And it's a lot easier to make those 2 or 3 footers than those 20 footers. So we need to make sure that we get the ball in the center of the face contact-wise. How do we do that? Well, obviously practice is one way, but again, when we go back to talking about equipment, we need to make sure that we have the right fit. So that's where it becomes important for you to come see your PGA professional, get fit not only for the right length and lie, but also, like we talked before, about the bounce of the club. Okay, and we can fit you for all those variables. When we fit you for wedges, we look at where the marks are on the golf club. Is the mark very heavy on the leading edge of the club, or is it very heavy on the trailing edge? We see a lot of mark on the trailing edge of the club. That means we need to get you in club with less bounce. Okay. The same applies for bounce when we get into the bunkers. Okay. Bounce is again going to be your friend in the bunkers, especially if you get into bunkers where you have a lot of sand. You got deep sand in your bunkers, you want to go with more bounce. If you have more shallow, just a couple 3 inches of sand in your bunkers, you want to go with less bounce. Again, less bounce, that club will kind of dig into the ground. More bounce, that club will bounce out. When you have a lot of sand in the bunker, you want that club to come in and bounce out. You don't want that club to keep digging, because again, you're going to hit that fat shot and it's going to go about 5 or 10 yards. So it's going to become very important that we make sure we get the right fit on your wedges. Not just your irons, not just your drivers, but your wedges. All aspects of your game should be fit so that we can properly control distance, number one, centerness of contact, number 2, and direction of the shot, number 3. Thanks for tuning into the instruction segment of Under Par. Thank you again for joining us. Back to see you in a couple weeks.